I assume some of you have seen articles featuring this statistic a few weeks ago. For everyone who does not know this statistic, what we are seeing here is the amount of games released on Steam over the years. And yes, 1/3 of all games ever released on Steam was released in 2016. And I am glad to announce that each and every one of these games is an absolute masterpiece. From the little indie studio trying to get off the ground with their first game, to the AAA developer bringing out their newest installment in their thrilling and engaging action series. And since everything is fine on Steam and all developers are honorable people with the best intentions, I am glad to say the world of gaming is perfect. So see you guys in the next video, when I'll be telling you why Call of Modern Warfare Infinite Duty is my favorite game of all times. Goodbye and This video wants to address several points. The lack of quality control on Valve's own sales platform Steam, and on the side of the developers themselves, as well as developers maliciously throwing out crap to make a quick buck, or even big developers releasing unfinished games for the sake of just releasing it, and re-releasing old games with cash cow features. Back when the first third-party games were released on Steam, I was excited. Especially about the release of Red Orchestra. That was a fine addition to Valve's own World War II shooters, Day of Defeat and Day of Defeat Source. Soon Steam was filled with a lot more third-party games, and of course more Valve titles. Remember the time when Valve still developed their own games? Those were the times. Especially for new and smaller developers, I always considered it to be a big achievement to have your game on the Steam store. Valve's own platform, and they don't just allow anything up there, don't they? Fast forward to today and have a look at this statistic by Sergei Galoikin. 38% of all Steam games were released in 2016, about 26% released in 2015 and further 16% in 2014. That's a massive growth over the last 3 years. The data of course not only includes new games released, but also older games re-released on Steam for the first time. However, the statistic does not include DLCs or non-game software, so different statistics could look even more drastic. Currently there are 12,380 games on Steam, and by the time you're watching this video, there will be even more. Now, are all of these games, especially the majority of the ones released in the last 3 years, all worth their money? Looking at what has passed through Greenlight, it appears that Valve doesn't care what's on Steam as long as they can earn a few cents of it. This trend of allowing poor quality content to be on the storefront of Steam has first been mentioned on this channel about a year ago when talking about Prospect, a standalone game riding on the Half-Life nostalgia train. Granted, the developer has been trying to make up for it and is trying to listen to advice, but additional content is coming along slowly. The developer appears to be an honest guy, and his work, even though wildly disliked, was never intended to be a cheap cash grab. At least that's what I think, giving him the benefit of the doubt. There are by far worse offenders out there, and looking at some of them, it seems obvious how we arrived here today. We all remember the DayZ and WarZ, or WarZ and or WarZ fiasco a few years ago, and how WarZ quite obviously copied DayZ's concept and tried to trick us into buying it by simply lying about features and doctoring screenshots. This kind of reminds me of back in the days when the developers of Command & Conquer Tiberian Sun put out screenshots with photoshopped explosions and other effects. That's the same kind of stuff the WarZ developers did to ride along the DayZ train. But even though the DayZ developers were on the receiving end, I have very little sympathy for them today, seeing how they deleted and censored negative and totally legitimate criticism of their game. But let's not waste our time at this old tragedy and target renders being passed off as actual in-game material. No, let us talk about the real bad apples, the ones that seriously could be filtered out by Steam. Let's call them early access abusers. You have studios like Tripwire Interactive, the creators of the before-mentioned Red Orchestra, who for the last development period of Killing Floor 2 offered the game in early access mode. The game was initially released with only one playable map and a fraction of playable classes and weapons. Over the course of the following month, the amount of content grew massively until the game got released not long ago. But the game's basics and gameplay were already established the day the early access launched, and the rest was just merely adding more of the same and tweaking around with some visual elements. This is how early access stories should sound like, but sadly, a lot of them sound very different. Let's look at this right here, a game simply called Dragon the Game. It has been in early access since 2014, and still it's not done. The game is being sold for $17.99 since the release, and back then, it just allowed you to fly around and do nothing else. They didn't even have sound back then. Jim Sterling reported on it a while ago, and I checked it out myself, and it is every bit as bad as he proclaimed it to be. And looking at it today, it appears as if nothing has changed, and the developers completely abandoned it. But even worse than people that sell overpriced games with almost no content are developers who sell games that are not even developed. I'm talking about developers who just throw together store-bought Unity assets and cobble it into a somewhat playable state, possibly just following some step-by-step tutorial on YouTube. There is no original theme in these games, no directing philosophy, nothing that makes them unique, and they all somehow look alike in their inconsistency of style. Pre-built assets are supposed to be a help at the start, a foundation to work upon, or best case scenario, placeholders until you come up with your own material, your own better material. They are not supposed to be the sole ingredient of your game. These bad apples are supposed to be the exception, but sadly, they are all too common. If you release a game in early access, you should have something to show for it. Actual content, playable missions with story elements, or a working multiplayer are the least one should expect from a product that you pay hard-earned money for. Early access is not Kickstarter. You are not on Steam to sell an idea or a concept. No, early access should be for saying, look what we have made so far, we are going to be done soon. Don't you want to come in early and maybe get 10% cheaper, and in return, tell us what we could do better and contact us if you find a bug. That's what decent developers are using early access for. And not for, hey, we have just started, this is a test map where you can walk around and do nothing, give us money and maybe we'll finish it one day. Of course, nobody is forced to buy these shit games, it's a free market. But time and time again it happens that customers get fooled into buying shitty products. Sure, the refund option helps, but often it takes more than 2 hours to figure out if a game sucks. Furthermore, it just doesn't look good on Steam's part if the store is filled up with these kind of disasters.
If you are looking for a great old-school style multiplayer FPS shooter game with today's eye candy, then shootertactics.com War as Hell game has everything you need and more. Like Kill Streak Announcer.
Ooh, a Kill Streak Announcer! How fancy! By the way, it's always funny to me when these games get defended from criticism with the argument, oh, it's just a mod, or oh, it's just early access, it's not done yet, don't criticize an unfinished product. Wait a minute, I shouldn't criticize a product I paid for? Clearly the developers think it's something worth paying for. And if I paid for something, whether I like it or not, I am entitled to voice my opinion about it. This counts for both so-called mods, which are actual standalone games, and early access titles alike. Take a look into the comments section of my prospect review. My criticism was admittedly harsh, but it wasn't unjustified. And still there are a lot of people telling me I should not criticize the developer's work because it's just a mod, not a pay-for mod. You know what? Here's the first official escalation rule. As soon as you charge money for your work can be criticized to the same standard as any other product you have to pay for. I think that's a reasonable rule. But it was cheap! Don't get mad about $10! Yeah, good arguments. If a game was broken, don't complain because it was cheap? Excuse me, sir, this USB hub, I bought it yesterday in your store and 2 of the ports are broken.
So? The other 4 ports are still working? What are you complaining about? You just paid $10.
Yeah, that's a pretty bad argument, isn't it? Another issue where some quality control would be great are old games being re-released on Steam. You probably all know these issues. You grab an old game you had laying around and want to play it for nostalgic reasons, but the old game has major issues with your modern system or won't run at all. For example, I'm a big fan of the original StarCraft and its Brood War expansion pack. I play it from time to time, but on my system, the main menu is just a big mess of green and blue pixels. Or try to get Star Wars Pod Racer to run on a modern system. Even with compatibility mode, it is a pain in the ass. So you would expect a re-release version of classic games in 2017 to be optimized for current generation computers. You cannot really expect customers to have a Voodoo Express graphics card laying around, let alone having one set up in a functional rig in this day and age. About a year ago I made a video about the Blitzkrieg spin-off Cuban Missile Crisis and its expansion. Both good games, but unlike the originals, which are also on Steam, these have issues adjusting to modern screen resolutions. That can be fixed with some tweaking, though these inconveniences should not happen with a game you just bought. The absolute pinnacle of crap are re-released games that do not work at all. I had some first-hand experience with that after buying the Earth 2150 trilogy on Steam. Again, a game that fills me with nostalgia. But except for the last game of the trilogy, I cannot run them properly. This game has the resolution fixed for modern systems, but 2 of the games crash every time I want to open the research center. And none of these games are able to run properly on an operating system other than Windows 7. Not okay for 2017. Let's do something unusual for this channel and depart away from the computer to the console for a second, namely the PS4. I don't own one, but I was able to record some footage of a re-release of one of my favorite games from the PlayStation 2 era, Star Wars Bounty Hunter. In and itself, a great game. I especially enjoy the story, great writing, but the game is not without its flaws, and I hope the PS4 release would fix some of those. Of course, for €10 or $10 you are not to expect a complete remastered game, but a 16:9 aspect ratio is not too much to ask for even for a download title. The game is just a straight port of the PS2 version. Still a good game, but it has these small issues which I find kind of annoying. It even has the missing background character animations the PS2 version had. You see, they are in default position, and that not only happens during cutscenes. These were just a few examples of lack of quality control on greenlight and re-releases. There are even worse stories out there. For example, games being re-released without executable files. It's great when they release a game without game files. And no, we are not talking about missing sound files or a placeholder model still being in the release version. No, the fucking file to start the game is missing. But in times of massive Day 1 patches for AAA games, or in case of the recent Call of Duty, a massive Day 35 patch to bring it into a playable state, who are we to expect anything better from small and indie developers when not even the big boys of the industry are able to properly playtest games, fix obvious issues, or ship games with all features available? How long did it take for Battlefront to be complete? Does Battlefield 1 already include all the features it is supposed to have? How the fuck are server admin tools something that has to be pushed out after the release? Did the people at DICE really think that when people host a private server with their own money, they want to only play the vanilla game? And while we are at the topic, spending money on a game that you already paid for, let's talk about a slippery slope. In the end of the video COD Infinite Warfare a AAA fail, I said that I like COD 4 Remastered. That is still true, but I have to add a big but. The game itself is still fine, discounting that even in the remake you are getting shoved around by NPCs like it's 2003, but what really annoys me, Activision's greediness has gotten the best of them. Not only did they bundled up the supposed good game with the ever-repetitive yearly shit, no, now they added microtransaction to a re-released old game. If you know this channel, you know my opinion on microtransactions. I don't like them in full-price titles. Like many other people, I like character customization. It's cool when you can add a little bit of your own design into a game, even if it's just mixing up provided elements. Paying for them was never something I liked. Not if I already spent 60 or more on the game. But why is this a slippery slope? Well, you might think this is a bit far-fetched, but if they add microtransactions to a remastered version of an old game, how long will it be until they sell remastered old DLCs? In my opinion, a remastered edition of an old game should include everything that came out for it. Especially if they charge 60 or more for an old game that just got a fresh coat of paint. But at least now I can finally play my Soviet Spetsnaz soldier with the authentic Russian name, T-Bone. We'll see what the future will bring. Will developers improve their playtesting? Will Steam do something that would count as quality control? Or will we chug on like before? Apparently people are okay with the shit that's going on. From greedy and dishonest developers to shady greenlight projects which never even planned to be a complete game. Will this trend go on in 2017? Even more half-baked tech demos with no actual tech to demonstrate and Unity asset store massacres that flood the store and try to pass off as an actual game? We will see. Yes, I will press the X button on my keyboard. I am rather pessimistic for the future. In times where the PC version is just a lazy console port and it is treated like an unwanted bastard that can be neglected because you won't make enough money anyway, my hopes are not high, at least when it comes to some AAA developers. About Steam? maybe we will see a change there, because having customers dig through tons of garbage before they see anything good cannot be in the store owner's interest. That's it for now with my ramblings about the current state of gaming affairs in relations to quality control and shady or outright incompetent developer decisions. I would be interested in hearing your opinion on today's topics, especially if you agree or disagree with escalation rule number 1. As soon as you charge money for your work can be criticized to the same standard as any other product you have to pay for. So see you guys in the comment section down below. If you haven't checked out my video about the implementation of pay for sprays in Counter-Strike, go ahead and give it a look. Till next time, have a nice day, and as always, goodbye and guten Tag.